thing. But here's the issue that we're facing for those of us who are within the church right now. We're facing a challenge from folks who are outside of the church. Because there are lots of people outside the church that to them, church doesn't matter a whole lot. And honestly, they don't see a lot of evidence that the church matters all that much to the people who are within it. Here's why I say that. Several years ago, in 2014, the Gallup organization, the one that does all of the polls, they were commissioned by a Christian publishing company to ask questions about church and about the view that many of these people that they were asking the questions to had about Christians. And so they were asking emerging generations like millennials, they were asking church refugees, people that had fled the church or had left the church after they got up a little older, and also religious nuns, N-O-N-E-S. Because the fastest growing religion in America for the past several years, I mean, maybe even a decade and a half, has been none. And so they asked these people, why is it that you don't go to church, and what is your view of Christians? And their answers were basically all encapsulated into 4 basic responses. And the fourth one was the one that troubled me the most. And this is what it was. Christians act like God doesn't really matter. Now, what do I mean when I say that, and what did they mean when they responded to the questions in this way? Well, it means this, that for many of these people, they would look out into culture and look out into society, and they would see people who claimed to be Christians who didn't seem to be all that energized and animated about their relationship with God, but were energized and animated about all kinds of other things, like elections and politics and social issues and culture wars and all the rest of it. And then, if that wasn't enough, they saw so many of their friends or relatives or loved ones who claimed to be Christians who never missed a Sunday when it came to going to church, but then would always be posting hateful and bigoted and divisive things on their social media pages along with Bible verses and inspirational quotes. And so they would say that they believed all of these things that they said they believed, but then their actions and the way that they presented themselves otherwise seemed to indicate that God didn't really matter. And then if that wasn't enough, they saw so many of their friends and people that they knew who claimed to be Christian and who claimed that that was a huge part of their life, to be part of a faith community, but then they never talked about it. They never shared anything about it. They didn't seem to be excited or enthusiastic about it. Now, I know that a lot of folks at this point would say, well, my faith is private. Well, the issue is that there are so many other private things that people of faith seem to have no problem posting about or talking about or sharing. They'll post something that has a photo of what they ate for dinner at their favorite restaurant. Or they see a movie that is amazing and they want everybody to know how amazing that movie is. Or don't even get me started about the way that we often lose our minds when our sports teams win. I mean, we've got so much excitement and energy in the Christian world about so many other things. Now, I get it. There's problems within the church, and I get that there are things that we get more excited about when it comes to all of these other issues. But you know, in the end, I think that those who are watching from the outside, they're looking for more. They're looking, does this really matter to them? Is it something that makes a difference in their life? And I get that church can sometimes be an exclusive place. I get that church can sometimes be a challenge. And I also get that church can sometimes be boring. I mean, you know, it can be. I've seen lots of people that seem like they were pretty bored in church, and I've been to a lot of boring worship services as well. Most of the boring worship services that I've been to, unfortunately, have been presbytery worship services. If you're wondering what that means, for those of us who are Presbyterian, we have a governing body, and we gather a couple times a year, and we have worship services during those times, and I can just say as a track record that most of those worship services tend to be on the boring side. And don't take my word for it. You can ask my son Jackson, who several years ago, I took him to a Presbytery meeting, not as punishment. I thought that I was actually trying to show him, like, this is what Dad does for a living. And so we were at this Presbytery meeting, and the worship service was probably, it wasn't like in the top 10 of most boring worship services I've ever been to in my life, but it was close. And so Jackson says to me afterwards, that was the worst church experience of my life. And I told him, I said, you haven't lived long enough, and you will probably have a worse one. I'm just going to prepare you for that. I know. Netflix has more drama. The golf club probably has friendlier people. The park has a nicer view. And none of these places and none of these spaces has anyone asking you for a pledge card or challenging you to do something uncomfortable like, oh, I don't know, love God and love everybody. Right? So I get it. I get it. But something happens when we are together. Something happens when we are together, no matter how we are together. Whether it's virtual or physical, when we gather together, it's mystical and wild and wonderful. And it doesn't have to be boring.